Well, hello, that's me again, and today is actually November 22, but will try to do the sponsor or patron thing and upload this video today, November 22, and make it public tomorrow, November 23. For if it doesn't work, then it's probably gonna go up tomorrow on the 23. But there is a reason I'm doing it next day from my last video, which I did yesterday on the 21st. And the reason for that is very simple. I never thought I would become a political commentator. Nothing wrong with being political commentator, and that's what I'm forced to do for the last several months with the start of the special military operation. And instead of concentrating on the larger, more substantial issues of geopolitics and its main driver, the military economic might of the state, I constantly have to also deal with all kinds of minutiae and explaining things here and there. It is like was the case with Kherson, which of course I spoke on a number of occasions about it, and then of course who knows what's coming next. Again, people don't understand. I do not have any access to the general staff, let alone to Kremlin, and I can only speculate. And that's when I speculate, that's what I say. I speculate, and this is my hypothesis, and take it for whatever it's worth. But there are some things which, for example, I know for sure, and which are pretty much my military background, and which I speak constantly. And my statement, or the point which I state for many years now, is very simple. Geopolitics is driven by military might, with military might being basically the first derivative of the real economy, real physical economy, or economic might of the state, or nation, if you wish, or nation state. And it is extremely important to understand that obviously it produces on itself the huge other derivatives of be them ideologically or strategically, the school of thought or doctrines and things of this nature. And this is what I wanted to talk about this today, because I'm kind of disturbed a little bit. It's okay, I understand that. So to speak, game plan here, if you wish, that I have to comment on this minutia, political minutia, tactical minutia. But obviously, I started my channel actually as the basically geopolitical channel, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. Talking about some, military porn, if you wish, the technological aspect of things, but then again, technological policy, technological development of the states, and especially their militaries, that's what drives a lot of things. And I want to start today with a very funny thing, really. Let me show you something, and which is related to what I do constantly. And if you read my books, and I'm on the record, I can defend my state, basically position on that, with huge number of arguments, and I can justify it, including by the calculations and by experience and by history, is the fact that I begin to lean more and more, and I mean it's a long time coming, issue for years now, that evidently the United States is not learning its military lessons. And I explain it in many places that, United States creates its armed forces primarily for commercial reasons and for the expeditionary warfare, which is primarily the pirate warfare, if you look at it. The only time when the United States was truly engaged on the so to speak, forces of good was during World War II, when it went and opened the Second Front and helped Soviet Union to defeat Nazi Germany. The rest of it is primarily what United States does, is expeditionary warfare, which is primarily for robbing some states and subjugating them, and this is a classic warfare of the imperialist power. But as such, United States, is impossible for United States to learn what actual warfare and real continental warfare is, especially on the main continent, or so to speak, landmass on the Earth, which is of course Eurasian landmass. This is where the whole thing happens, guys. This is where the whole history actually was developing, including, of course, the rise of the Western civilization. And so I start with this. to demonstrate to you why I'm insisting on what I'm insisting. And here it is. In At the start of the special military operation, Newsweek, which is the Neocon rag, they started to write about this Mozart group, which is like, the basically a little bit of a joke, pun towards the now famous Russian Wagner group. And that's what they started to write about it. The Mozart group was established during the war by ex-US Commander Colonel Andrew Milburn, the first Marine to lead the Special Operations Task Force during the war against the so-called Islamic State. As you know, obviously, it wasn't a very successful war because not only the United States haven't been able to defeat it, but the United States actually supported it. And it was when Russians got involved, then that's when the Islamic State had actually floors wiped with it. But in terms of Mozart, that's what they say. Basically that it was the kind of, pun intended on Russian Wagner group. And they were involved, those Mozart people, into the war, basically since the start. And this is where we have to come to the basically piece of news or piece of information which you usually do not get in the Western media, and this is what it is. As one of the commanders of militia, make no mistake, it's Lugansk militia. This is not even regular Russian troops, nor it is actually people from Wagner group. And here's what RIA News basically published today. And LNR guy, he compared the Mozart from the United States and the group Wagner group. And that's what he stated, that the Mozart is not even competitor, cannot counter anything against the Wagner group. And then he explains to it, why it cannot counter even Wagner group and why they are not even in the same league. And this is what his explanation is. I will translate it to you. In order for them to counter Wagner, to be able to compete with Wagner, they have to possess armor. They have to have some kind of the aircraft, like helicopters, aircraft like combat aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft, with which they actually got used to fight in the other countries. That is why he thinks, this guy from LNR, the colonel or lieutenant colonel of LNR militia, that their main task is primarily moral, psychological, and to kind of make armed forces of Ukraine feel that they can win. And yes, he's absolutely correct stating this here, because in general, and you can actually read it on the website of my friend Larry Johnson, he wrote about it, all this special ops, all this Tom Clancy bullshit, it looks cool, it's very good fodder for Hollywood and things like that, but special ops are a very narrow, very specific group of people who decide a very local, basically try to obtain very local objectives which are completely subservient to the large operations. And this is where what people in Pentagon still, some of them get it, but most don't. And people in all kinds of those, private companies, military companies, still don't get it. That, guys, this is real war. The way real war is supposed to be fought, not just killing civilians, blowing to shit all those, weddings and things of this nature. No, this is not it. And of course, we know about the School of Americas, where they teach you how to rape women, how to kill civilians, and things of this nature. So there's a proud tradition of war crimes in the United States military, and which it exports pretty much all over the world. So you basically understand what those guys are. And when you think that some kind of, SEAL Team 6 or whatever, can withstand the barrage of 152 millimeter shells, well, I have a bridge to sell you. But that's how the real war is fought. And I brought this Mozart funny group for a reason. Because suddenly, Well, not really suddenly. Let's not kind of say that it is suddenly. But today, as well as for the few months now, there is a really a serious issue with some, so to speak, set of the traditional military thinkers in the United States, former military, former cadre officers, and all kinds of other amateurs from all kinds of the publications which are basically masturbate on the military technology. Then when they begin to study, talk about, oh my gosh, logistics. Well, guess what? Today or yesterday, let me see. I believe it is. Yeah, they don't even have the date today. Yeah, one day ago. We have Mr. James Holmes, actually, a very respectable man and a very interesting naval thinker. And he taught, and I believe he still teaches in the Naval War College, and this is what he suddenly recognizes and publishes. It's one of those many, whatever the 1945 project, Defense One News and things like of this nature. He talks about, oh my God, the sneaky way China could win a war against America. And that's where he says, what he says, kill the logistics fleet. The U.S. Armed Forces can accomplish little in the Western Pacific without ample and regular supplies of all types, from fuel to ammunition to foodstuffs. Is he correct? Oh, he is absolutely correct. And that is why he basically conveys here the other iteration of the famous proverb that while amateurs talk about tactics, professionals talk about logistics, because that's how you fight the real war. It's logistics, and of course your lanes of communications, be they on the ground or be they obviously shipping lanes of communications, and that's what Holmes talks about. And he continues, let me see where he continues it. There are other things which he tries to say. And he mentions in his basically article that, oh my gosh, if you look at the basically what Russians experienced in a war in Ukraine is the fact that basically they had the issues with the logistics and supply of the Russian army. This is, of course, a complete news to anybody who knows anything about what is happening with SMO. And I basically blame it, if you wish, on the fact that those people are absolutely ignorant on the issue of what is going on there. And of course, if you are ignorant and if you do not have facts from the ground, on the ground, you're not gonna get correct, you're not gonna get, learn correct lessons. And fact is, this is what United States have been learning wrongly for the last, 17 years. Evidently, nothing has been learned. And the reason I say this is because obviously, while there were some issues with supply of the militias, there were no serious issues with the logistics in the Russian army, which fought from the inception of the start of the SMO. And those small, they are not, basically not widespread. There were like issue here, issue there, which is normal. Some few bombs with mobilized force during partial mobilization. They have nothing to do with logistics per se. They had a lot to do with the mobilizational plans and the way they were planned during the Mr. Serdikov. But in terms of the supplying frontline units, you know what? All this BS is beginning to circulate within the American, so to speak, pop military circles for a reason. It's basically butthurt and envy, because obviously Russian troops on the front line in Ukraine, they don't have problems with the ammo, they don't have problems with the all kind of other stuff, and those things and facts which come out about shortages here, shortages there, are primarily from the militias, and primarily, actually, a lot of it is, at least, 50% are rumors. And of course, yeah, it was inevitable that American and Western media and those so-called military analysts, they grabbed onto it because evidently I have to remind those kids and those people what happened to U.S. troops the first days they have been dropped in Afghanistan in 2000 and in 2001. But that is a separate issue. So this is basically all wrong, but let me tell you where it's coming from. And it's coming from this. So we have this Defense One reporting that logistics wins wars, but not if the new enemy capabilities can disrupt supply lines. And this was written 5 days ago by some Elizabeth Howe. By the look of her, she's obviously very well versed in the logistics and strategies. But look at this. When they speak about one of this, statements issued and thoughts issued by all kinds of American military leaders and people from DARPA, no less, started to talk about this. We've gone to war in the past with extremely large and frankly vulnerable supply lines. It is an American way of war through logistics. It is one of our greatest strengths, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics and Technology, Doug Bush, said at a DARPA event. Well, there is a actually immediate lie here, a lie in the sense that America never fought really under the strain of its lines of communications and its logistics. Are they vulnerable, as he says, Mr. Bush says? Oh, absolutely, they are extremely vulnerable. And that's the problem. But look at this. In order to make his point, obviously, Mr. Bush begins to lie. It isn't the sexiest thing, frankly, the Army does, but it is very important, Army Secretary, it's another lady, Secretary Christine Wormuth said at the DARPA event. Just look at how the Russian military in Ukraine has struggled to resupply and feed its soldiers. That shows you the importance of logistics today on a contested battlefield. Well, I mean, again, they say all the right words, but of course they base some things on the things which really haven't defined the actually supply lines and supply of Russian troops. Some in the militias, absolutely, they were having some issues. But if you look at the frontline Russian troops, they are extremely well dressed, extremely well equipped, well fed. And again, if you look at the logistics and of the Russian army from the start of the operation, you will see everything, including the mobile bathhouses and all kinds of things. Excellent mobile hospitals. And so there you go. This is how you fight the war. But of course, they basically blow everything out of proportion because it is the only way to do this. And the reason they do is very simple. United States never fought with the interrupted or interdicted lines of communications. If they want to fight Russia, they want to fight Russia, but they cannot. And this is the issue which I'm here today to describe to you and discuss, is the fact that can they be resupplied in case of serious war? No. And Mr. Holmes, when he speaks about, for example, China and Western Pacific, the same applies also to Europe, be that on the ground, let alone on the basically shipping lanes of communications or lanes of supply of the supposedly some NATO force which were supposed to fight Russians there. And here is the very important article of which I already presented it to you in my few other videos previously, a few months ago. And I believe it's one of the crucial articles and exceptionally revealing article, because this is the admission of basically that in real war, United States will not be able to resupply its troops in Europe. Same applies actually to a certain degree to the supply lines and shipping lines of communications for American Preposition and Sea Lift Command. If you look attentively, what are those Sea Lift Command, what is the Sea Lift Command is, and the preposition for, so there it is. So the prepositioning ships, this is the part of this Sea Lift Command, those ships, they are really large ships, they provide quick and efficient movement of military gear between operating areas without reliance on other nations' transportation networks. These ships give U.S. regional combat commanders the assurance that they will have what they need to quickly respond in a crisis. Anywhere, anytime. During a contingency, troops are flown into a theater of operations to rapidly employ the cargo from these ships. If you look at this and you read this, it says, yeah, that sounds kind of reasonable. Yes, it sounds kind of reasonable if you think about it, only for the operations by the very limited force against some third world nation, which has no ability to interdict any kind of the supply lines. And if you look at those ships which actually operate in this sea lift command or preposition also, you will get yourself the ships which have the displacement of their basically 60 to 65,000 tons, very large ones. They can basically transport all kinds of their weapon systems, from tanks to APCs, and stocks of all kinds of other necessary supplies, including fuel and things of this nature, including obviously foodstuff. But when the special military operation started in February, you can read immediately this, that on 2nd of March, U.S. Army activated preposition stocks in Europe. It was the 45th Special Brigade which prepositioned, activated those, so to speak, and those stocks, and prepared and pushed out more than 600 vehicles and equipment pieces such as M1 Abrams, M2 Bradleys, and all kinds of the hardware. And as you can see, this on your photo, equipment is being loaded onto military and commercial line hauled trucks to be delivered to Grevenwohr training area in Germany. You will see yourself a very big concentration of things, and I'll give you immediately some news which are really bad news for the United States. It is extremely difficult to transport M1 Abrams by rail. In fact, it's almost impossible, and that is why you need trucks, which of course, when you begin to supply something with trucks, guess what? You lose tempo tremendously. But keep in mind this photograph. This is very important. So what we have is this. Basically, they explain that this Army Field Support Brigade, AFSB, has fully activated its Army Preposition Stock, APS-2 sites, and all 4 battalions assigned to the 405th AFSB prepared and pushed out more than 600 vehicles and equipment pieces from their respective IPS sites during the 2nd week of February. So, why it is important? Well, let me put it this way. You already saw the photographs, right? If you fight, let's say, Luxembourg, that's easy, right? Or Iraq. If you fight Russia, Russia already now knows where all those APS, those preposition stocks are, where they're concentrated, and that means what? Russia has their actual targeting. And no matter what you do, even if Russia shoots relatively slow 3M14 calibers, you still will not be able to do anything within the even 2 hours or hour which it takes to fly into those positions and preposition stocks to do anything, to disperse them. Once you begin to disperse them in the industrial amounts, that will tell you also that you're preparing some kind of the attack or invasion. And the necessary measures will be taken by Russians, for example, immediately. But the same goes for the prepositioning sea lift command, which begins to push its number of ships with a huge resupply if they want to do something against China. And here is why I concentrate on this issue, because let me present to you this article, which I already presented, as I already stated, few months ago. And this is an incredible article by Mr. Metric from the U.S. Naval Institute Proceedings, and he talks about it in 2019, that unmined the gap. Of course, this famous Giuk Gap, which is on the north between Greenland, Iceland, and United Kingdom. The old-time Soviet Navy was trying to push, and did push successfully. Look up Atrina and port operations of Soviet and Russian nuclear submarines, basically breaking through into the Atlantic. And he writes about very important things here. Look what he writes. In 2019, he talks about logistics and the fact, look at this. Look at the subscript to the photo which you see was M1 Abrams. Today, Russia does not need to hunt sea lift vessels in the open ocean to halt U.S. reinforcements on NATO. Its long-range land attack cruise missiles can strike vital North Sea infrastructure, such as the port of Bremerhaven, the primary U.S. surface port of the debarkation in Europe for the Norwegian and Barents Seas. And that's what he concludes and continues to conclude. Precise deep strike against real logistic areas was the exact problem NATO imposed on the Soviet forces at the end of the Cold War. This is the world NATO planners now face. And then he continues further when he talks about the issue of the extremely not vulnerable, basically indefensible lines of communications, shipping lanes of communications for the United States Navy and the NATO force, which United States is supposed to resupply. And he talks about the measures which need to be taken. This will require developing a new generation of anti-submarine warfare capabilities. Chief among potential systems are large unmanned underwater vehicles with considerable on-station time to provide initial cueing for other anti-submarine warfare assets. In addition, the Navy will need a new family of disposable acoustic payloads. A major element would be small disposable UUVs and unmanned surface vessels. And he goes on and on and on, and not without sense. I mean, again, it's this is the article written by a professional who gave it a lot of thought, so to speak, about how to kind of defend it, how to deal with the anti-submarine warfare issues. By the way, which also China will have to deal in case United States decides to do something about China. And here is where we get to this point of which I state non-stop. United States lost the arms race. It lost arms race not on just in some specific area. It lost it strategically across the board. And pardon me. And what I need to say here is that this thing, they cannot overcome it in the United States, because you need to completely change the force structure, you need to completely change your doctrine, and you completely need to change your technology. And of course, once I show you this picture, you have to remember it. That tells you everything you need to know. For example, you can see yourself 5 Russian submarines basically taking the position in Atlantic, and submarines are armed with the Onyx, 3M54, Zircon, and other missiles, anti-shipping missiles, which can sink pretty much most of the US Navy if, God forbids, it comes to it. Or they can do hunting for any kind of the escorts and any kind of the convoys which will be going towards Europe. And fact is, with the addition of Zircon now to the surface fleet, do not forget, the picture changes dramatically, because Russians have a significant surface fleet, and now they have a very vast, actually, long-range aviation, which also carries a lot of long-range anti-shipping missiles. So how do you resupply? Well, that's the issue. In case of real war, I don't think so. The chances of the resupplying are really good. And if you look at the recent stories from Russia, for example, you will see yourself that Russians just almost 10 days ago, they signed an additional contract for the Zircon missiles, and because obviously the contract of their 2021 have been fulfilled. How many? I don't know, 100, zircons. So Russians signed additional zircon for surface fleet, and this will involve about, they say, several dozens or several tens, if you wish. So make your own conclusion. And of course, in this particular case, you're talking about the U.S. Navy air defense, which doesn't work really against that type of the attacks. And automatically, if it doesn't work, well, guess what? The fundamental striking and defensive force of the U.S. Navy, its carrier battle groups, become, well, in real war, useless. And once they become useless, because the surface escort will become useless once they are attacked, because they will not be able to intercept either the Zircon, Salvasol Zircon or Onyx missiles. Then what do you have? What you have left? You have left basically only one thing which the United States will have underneath the waves. It's nuclear-powered submarines. Well, that's a separate issue how you fight them, because it's obviously a top-notch force. But other than that, I don't think so you can do much, especially not only with Zircon, but now with the Poseidon. The rumors now circulate that some of the Poseidons have been already implanted somewhere in Atlantic or somewhere in the Pacific. Nobody knows. And when you have this type of the escalation domination, you don't have the serious air defense which can intercept everything which will be thrown at you. How are you going to fight? You can't. And that let me remind you one of those books which have been published in 1996 by Gregory V. Stika. It is a very fascinating book, and while it speaks about a lot of things in terms of the moral decay in the U.S. Navy, about complete corruption which basically permeated the top brass and the basically industrial base, but it's a funny book because he writes in this book, which is Fall from Glory, The Man Who Sunk the U.S. Navy. He talks about the fact of which actually we have a complete confirmation now from different sources that the United States completely misunderstood the intentions of the Soviet Navy, completely overreacted, and basically by committing itself completely to the carrier-centric Navy, it basically doomed it in the long run. And in this particular case, I'm not going to be discussing tailhook and other scandals, but that's a separate issue. But in this case, Vistika is absolutely correct. And there are many other people who are pointing it out, including me, for years. You cannot fight with this force. It's not the force structure you can fight a real serious war. And of course, when you look at it, the first thing which you get, especially when you are basically based, your whole foreign policy is based on the expeditionary warfare, which automatically means a very long, what is called shoulder, the length of shipping, lengths of communications. You become absolutely vulnerable, especially in the environment where Russia simply dominates the long-range anti-shipping and land attack missiles. And those ranges of 1,500 kilometers and over are just the start. Essentially, we are entering the basically era or time frame in which the anti-shipping missiles, hypersonic missiles, will reach the ranges in excess of 2,500 kilometers, and they are coming. How are you going to stop it? And for Mach 9 missile, it takes 2 missiles to basically disable or sink the whole aircraft carrier, let alone some supply ship filled with all kinds of ordnance and oil and fuel and what have you. So there you go. And when you look at this, you begin to understand what a dramatic and strategic defeat the United States already has sustained. And I'm going to be talking more about it. But now, because it's kind of my first attempt to really put everything immediately for my patrons, I will be posting it all, for the open free viewing tomorrow on the YouTube. So, and this is what I wanted to tell you today, give you just another kind of strategic and operational view on those things. And as usual, guys, for those people who want to support me, please support me on Patreon and buy me coffee or whatever. And my profound gratitude to my wonderful supporters and patrons. And I'll talk to you guys later and probably after the American Thanksgiving. And guys, have a nice Thanksgiving and nice turkey dinner. I certainly will. Bye bye.